Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now the cost question,
Okay.
the reimbursement question.
Okay. I had a meeting with Darren Bland, who's the project manager for Mammut, the hauler of the entire project. Talked to him by telephone just after our last committee meeting, and discussed with him at a previous face-to-face meeting when he had proposed that they may consider entering into an agreement such as they've entered into with ISP and the Montana State Patrol. I indicated to him at that time that my advice would be that the city did not enter into an agreement, but we might be interested, council might be interested in being reimbursed for those costs. Then we had our meeting. At that point, I asked Mr. Bland by telephone, because one of the suggestions was, could we seek reimbursement through the Idaho State Police, who has a contract with Mammut? Mr. Bland indicated that he didn't see any reason not to. It made him more comfortable because then he'd have a document. Within a day or so, we received word from Lieutenant Oswald and his commanders that can't do that. Cannot seek reimbursement through ISP. So I have another communication out to Mr. Bland. I think he's going to try and come in sometime next week to discuss it, and we'll see what we're looking at that point. He did indicate that, as he has in the past, that we keep records, and if it is ultimately approved, that they would reimburse for past expenses as well. So,
and ultimately approved by us.
Approved by the city for the reimbursement, and approved by Mammut for payment.
Gary, I interrupted you, Tim, because I couldn't see past Dan. Gary, everything we do is spelled out. That's why these committees meet.
Yes.
For 3 hours, and at this point, 10 minutes before council meetings to look at paperwork and documentation. Mm-hmm. Why not an agreement with Mammut? Do we do an agreement with the U of I for additional police services at their request?
Yes.
Then why the balking?
Because that's at the U of I's request.
Yeah. The U of I.
Why the balking?
But this is at our request.
Yeah. The U of I is at, if I may.
Go ahead.
The agreement with the U of I is to provide services. There are no particular, I guess, in enforcement of the law, services that are different for the U of I as they are for the rest of the city. We do provide some additional services, and have for historically since the mid-'60s, such as operating the gun lock or things like that. In this situation, the city of Moscow is not providing services to Mammut. The City of Moscow Police Department is providing services to the public for public safety.
Then put that as the first sentence in the agreement.
That's something, now again.
And the second sentence is, Mammut agrees to reimburse the city for its additional cost of the defined load. I mean, that's what we're asking for. My understanding is that they have agreed to pay it. The chief has developed a spreadsheet or a back of an envelope keeping up with it. Mm-hmm. This committee has said, we believe that we should be reimbursed. This is, if you're going to do, it's the other side of the permit question. If these permits are $1,300 a piece and you're going to run 200 loads through here, that's $250,000. On the other hand, if we're running $1,000 a night extra, or taking our regular shift police off of streets to be down here, that's $200,000 cost to the city of Moscow if you extrapolate it way out.
Fully understand that.
So I think what we've indicated is we would like to be paid back for our cost of providing the public safety and dealing with this.
Go ahead, Tim.
And when I had my finger up and you couldn't see me, my thought was, as I have stated before, I assume the discussion has only been for policing services.
Yes.
But in my heart, I feel as though there's some admin expense that the city has experienced over and above what they would normally be experiencing.
And again, as I said last time, the reason this is different in my mind from a homicide or a bad car wreck or a big fire is this is a recurring situation that is the result of the loads coming through here. And the hauler, as I keep saying, to my knowledge, has indicated they would not be adverse to paying for that.
I agree that the indication is that at least preliminarily they'd be willing to enter into a contract. From my position as a city administrator, I can't see why a contract is necessary if the agreement is that they will reimburse on a cost sheet. Then a contract really is superfluous.
Well, then why don't we just mail them a bill for cost to date?
I think
and see what happens.
I
Let's
think
do it.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree that, I mean,
Up to point.
and then if something happens again this Thursday, we send them a bill. If they go again Monday, we'll send them another bill. I mean,
Let's send them a bill once a week, so we're not sending bills out every day.
I understand that.
But you had asked that they be billed on a per event.
Yes.
yeah.
Well, or
Basis?
per
Well, I'm not-
short time period.
Yeah, we're not looking for a flat fee for whatever happens that day. Or, you know,
Actual costs.
we're looking for actual costs of that day, not a flat fee for
If the
each.
problem is an agreement, then send them a bill.
I have no problem with sending them a bill. However, I would like to meet with Mr. Bland as agreed and find out if that is in fact the protocol that at least his employer is comfortable with.
Guess if they don't pay it, you'll know they aren't.
Mayor,
Thank you, Dan.
Ma'am?
The contracts would be mutually binding, and so the issue is whether Moscow Police can pick and choose their priorities. If those loads are coming through and they're providing the coverage agreed to by contract, and then they're called across town, maybe a couple of different directions for other urgent matters, who gets the first in line. The other aspect about compensation for exempt employees, for people in department head positions, for example, I think runs afoul of some of the employment law, and so I think
I'm
we have
not
to be
quite as set in
very-
stone on the leadership positions as other council people are.
And then the other point I wanted to make was that if the council sets this precedent, I would presume that bills essentially would be sent out to anybody who requires police attention, and I don't know that that's
On a
a very...
recurring basis, Mayor. This is a recurring situation. We bill Renaissance Fair every time they hold one under some agreement, I think. We do Rendezvous in the Park, where we are asked to do
council
beer gardens and
approves
whatever. Council-approved agreements. We do the U of I for special events. We do that already. And I know I interrupted you, but I'm just getting tired of this. The agreement can be written that we will provide, if possible, or in some language like that, and if we have to have an agreement, otherwise, send them an invoice and see what happens. I mean, 30 loads is going to cost us $30,000. 200 loads is going to cost us $200,000. This is a cost to the citizens of Moscow that we didn't ask for, that's being put upon us. And I'm just befuddled by the foot dragging at trying to get paid for it. When the council members, 3 at least, are sitting here saying, we would like to be paid for it.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, we have other carriers. There seems to be a suggestion that Moscow is aligned to become the preferred industrial corridor. And if, in fact, we become a place where Ryash, which is another entity that is sending loads to Alberta, becomes a regular carrier through town, they also have loads that are 23 and a half feet wide. They have some of the same implications. Do we, is it the council's intent,
requires
the administrative committee's intent, that we send them
requires
bills
the
to?
police presence to ensure the public safety through, while that load is coming through, then yes.
There have been oversized loads of that size come through this summer that have not had protesters and not required additional police presence. As I said before, the police are out there because of the protesters, but we can't bill the protesters. They've got a right to do it, but we've got a public service commitment to the citizens to try to keep both the protesters, the observers, the families holding children's hands safe when these things go through. And if that's what's required, we're going to do it.
Right, and what I'm saying is that Moscow Police will be there to the extent that staffing allows, and
To be there to the extent
the
that the
ci-
chief feels he needs to be there.
That's correct. That's exactly what's gone on. And for the safety of law enforcement personnel, for the availability of numbers, some of you perhaps saw my email today saying that, we're talking about advance notice when the police department isn't even notified
Yeah, I agree.
of ITD's intent, and the Idaho State Police are not notified of the intent. Gee, when are we going to hear about it if their service is required? And I think that's very important, that we treat all of these parties equitably. That's always been the City of Moscow's practice, and I would say that it may not always be exclusively ExxonMobil Imperial Oil,
Yeah.
but other carriers as well.
You're preaching to the choir regarding that.
Okay.
If any other carrier, whether like we talked about months ago, if it was a bubblegum truck that somebody decided they needed to protest and the chief felt he needed to have a presence there, then we would bill double bubble for whatever
Right.
needed to happen.
But the intimation and the expectation is that Moscow Police can always provide that service, and I won't speak for the chief, but I would say that may
At
not
some
always
point,
be the case.
and Chief Duke has said that at some point he's going to say, well, not this week, give us time to, gather the troops back up and get ready for the next one.
And is that in keeping with the contract? That was the bottom.
Well,
my
I think
question.
that contract, it's going to be, and I understand it's going to be a difficult thing to write because there may be a time when, it doesn't require a significant police presence. We might be able to get by with just 2 officers down there some night versus 12 the next or 20. Or they may not need any at all. I mean, I don't know how, we'll have to let the legal minds figure out how to craft this agreement to where, each load is going to be different. We can say we're going to be as equitable as we're going to be, but everything's going to come out different. There's been times when I've watched these come through when nobody was there to protest it. And whether it was a press release issue or what, but, this isn't the load's fault, but the loads are the reason for what we're having to do.
And so how do you suggest the police staff that?
That's what we're trying to
the
figure
question.
out.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Send an invoice?
I think that's the only thing we can do is.
So,
But you're going to meet with Mr. Bland, and I
Yes.
wouldn't mind hearing what you find out from that meeting.
okay.
And then,
So is the direction to meet with Mr. Bland and go from there?
yes. And, if they're amenable to paying an invoice, we'll send them an invoice. If there's something else, then we may need to.
He's coming this week.
He's coming, I believe, he's out this week. It would be the beginning of next week.
So we may not hear anything as a body until.
He has, as I indicated, he indicated that if there were past expenses, they would be honored if the agreement or understanding was that they would be reimbursed.
So catch us up.
Yes.
That's fine. Let's
Okay.
get that done then.
Thank you.